Alright, my name is Alec. It's May 14th, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm going to be talking about Bartram's Garden. Bartram's Garden is a 45-acre National Historic Landmark at 54th Street and Lindenberg Boulevard in southwest Philadelphia. It sits on the Schuylkill River and is home to tidal wetlands, wildlife habitats, and a meadow. It's also a collection of trees and plants found and grown by self-taught botanist John Bartram and his family from 1728 to 1850. The garden is operated by the John Bartram Association and the Philadelphia Department of Parks and Recreations, which is part of the city government. It's also free to explore. There's no charge to visit. You can take art classes there, enjoy concerts, craft shows, or buy wreaths and such in December there. So you might wonder what it's like to wander into the 18th century garden, just right in the middle of southwest Philadelphia. I'm sure that if you weren't really expecting to find the garden, it definitely would be quite a surprise to stumble upon the garden. As for the history, not only is it weird, beautiful, anachronistic, it's also very historically important. 18th century Philadelphia was a special place. It was home to some of the world's leading scientists and thinkers. John Bartram, also his buddy Benjamin Franklin, who you might know of. Who was John Bartram? Really, that's a good question. He was a Quaker, born in 1699 in Darby, Pennsylvania. He died 78 years later in 1777. He loved nature, science, and learning in general. With Benjamin Franklin, he founded the American Philosophical Society. In 1728, he bought 102 acres of land on the western bank of the Schuylkill River. And at this point, he began collecting plants. He traveled all over North America to Florida, New England, Lake Ontario, and numerous places in between. He would bring back plants that are actually still on his property to this day. He also collected seeds. And, people were really impressed with John Bartram's vast knowledge of botany. A great example of this, in 1765, King George III appointed John Bartram as the royal botanist. Thomas Jefferson and George Washington visited his property and were inspired to collect plants for their own estates. To support his garden, John Bartram would he'd sell seeds and plants to gardeners all throughout Europe and the colonies who didn't have some of the plants that he had. And what he would do is he would pack these wooden crates with 100 or more varieties of seeds and dried plant specimen, and each crate would cost 5 guineas, which is $7, which as of now would translate to $7.20, somewhere in between $7.20 to $10.80. And these crates would be popular all throughout Europe, and John Bartram's seeds began changing the gardens and farms of Europe, adding species that had never grown there before. Suddenly Europeans would have magnolias, mountain laurels, rhododendrons. They would have maple trees and sumacs that gave new color to the land in the fall. This successful business survived the Revolutionary War and continued into the mid-1800s, which I imagine would be pretty hard to do, being that he sold to, everyone really. Didn't discriminate from colonists to anyone else. And there are also other members of the Bartram family who carried on John Bartram's love of plants. There was his son, William, who lived from 1739 to 1823, who was a botanist, an illustrator, and an author. His books on plants are actually still read to this day. Wow. His granddaughter, Anne Bartram Carr, also kept up the garden and plant business. She was born in 1779 and died in 1858. When she ran the business, it expanded to 10 greenhouses and a huge collection of American and exotic species. Unfortunately, though, by 1850, the garden was having financial trouble and had to be sold. The Bartram family had to move away. However, not the end of the world there, because luckily, the garden was purchased by Andrew Eastwick, who was a wealthy railroad car manufacturer. And as a boy growing up in Philadelphia and playing near Bartram's garden, he always dreamed of living there. And at that point, as a wealthy man, he was able to make this dream come true. He preserved the garden as a private park. And this was a good thing, because by the time he died in 1879, the industrial expansion on the Schuylkill River was threatening to destroy Bartram's garden. And Andrew Eastwick had prevented the garden from being turned into just another factory, which is pretty good. And in 1891, the city of Philadelphia bought Bartram's garden, and in 1893, descendants of John Bartram formed the John Bartram Association to help preserve its legacy. This organization continues to manage the garden this day, as I said before. Now, when you explore the garden, what you'll do is you'll follow a brick path to a small group of old stone buildings, and like the Welcome Center it's sort of like a complex of buildings. There's the Welcome Center. It's just like these three buildings around like a brick courtyard type thing. It's a Welcome Center, just like a bathroom, and there's also a barn is the other one of the buildings, and it was built by John Bartram in 1775 and is the oldest standing barn in Philadelphia County. It's a beautiful example of a two-story Pennsylvania banked barn. There's also a coach house. Started as a small nursery building, but now it houses a library containing many books belonging to the Bartrams. It also houses archives and classrooms for workshops. And pretty soon, you'll notice the Bartram House. It's made of the same stone as the barn and other buildings, and looks like a Pennsylvania farmhouse with 3 huge carved columns. It took over 40 years to complete and is meant to resemble an Italian villa. Now, in front of the house right now, there's a lot of mess and construction debris, and this is because the Ann-Carr Garden is under construction here. It's going to be a recreation of the real, a recreation of the real 19th century garden that contained species from Asia. The garden was lost over time, but when it was around, it was considered one of the most beautiful in the area. As you walk around the buildings, you'll see some special trees. One is the Franklinia alatamaha. John and William Bartram first noticed this tree in 1775 along the Alatamaha River in southern Georgia. Alright? And William Bartram brought seeds back to Philadelphia and planted this tree. He named it in honor of, guess who? Benjamin Franklin. And this type of tree had not been seen in the wild since the early 19th century. The Bartrams saved the tree from extinction. You can also observe when you're there the oldest ginkgo tree in North America. It's a male tree, which means it does not produce those little berries, And it was sent to John Bartram in 1785. There's also a medicinal plant display that reflects John Bartram's lifelong interest in plant medicine. Today, many of our medicines are derived from plants. John Bartram discovered a surprising number of North American medicinal plants. He also wrote a treatise about them that was published in London in 1751. So, what's it like wandering around this historical garden? I would say that it's really odd to go from sort of a cityscape such as Southwest Philadelphia to this sort of rural-looking area. It was always in the back of my mind when I was there, where I was, and it was hard to shake the feeling that the whole thing is somewhat out of place. As for the future of Bartram's Garden and what lies ahead for this treasure in southwest Philadelphia, well, there are plans to connect the garden, which is on the west bank of the Schuylkill River, with the Schuylkill Banks walking and biking trail on the east side of the river in Center City and southwest Philadelphia. This popular trail has been established for a while. You've probably been there before. And recently it's been extended with a wooden boardwalk and pathway that reaches to the South Street Bridge. Pretty cool, right? The city plans to restore an old abandoned swing bridge to connect the Schuylkill Banks Trail with Bartram's Garden. The bridge will be just for pedestrians and bicyclists. In conclusion, I'd say it's a very nice place. I would go back there if the opportunity presented itself. I would also recommend that anyone go there for any reason. It's really a nice place. Alright, good talk. Bye.